Hello guys, in this Math Minute video, we are going to talk about a very exciting skill, and that is the skill of adding and subtracting with fractions and mixed numbers. Now, I called it part 1 because this skill can get a little complicated. So in today's lesson, we are only going to deal with addition and subtraction mixed numbers that do not require any regrouping. This skill is one of my favorite to teach. It is a little tough, but it's also very exciting because we use it all the time in real life, especially for projects that involve cooking and building. In fact, by pure chance today, this picture was taken in my backyard this morning. We're building a shed. We've been using tons of addition and subtraction with fractions. And then I went to make some cookies, and I didn't have enough butter, and so I had to use this same skill to adjust my recipe so I could make cookies as the recipe called. So just in one day this morning, I've already used the skill that we're about to talk about 2 times, and that's pretty cool. When we add and subtract with fractions and mixed numbers, it's really important to get the pieces the same size. And in order to do that, we're going to find what's called a common denominator. Remember that a denominator is just the bottom number in the fraction, and it tells you how many pieces total it would take to make the whole. That's why when we add and subtract with fractions and mixed numbers, we don't change the denominator. We only will be changing the numerator. And after we see these problems in action, that might make a little more sense to you. So the first thing that we have to identify is what size is our whole. And in this case, I'm going to use this red bar to represent one whole. And so even though this red bar is not really being used in our problem per se, it will help give you an understanding of what size pieces we're working with. And I'm going to just grab one of these pink and one of these green. Now, if I wanted to add these two together, I know I have 2 pieces, but they're not the same size, so I can't really call them the appropriate amount until I find out how big they are. I see it takes 2 of these pinks to make one whole, so that's how I know that this pink piece is worth 1/2. Now I'm going to find out how many of these green pieces it takes to make the whole. It looks like it's going to take 5 pieces to make that whole. And that is how I'm going to be able to identify that that green piece is worth 1/5. So if I'm trying to add 1/2 and 1/5 together, some kids will try to just add the numerators and add the denominators and hope that 2/7 is the answer. But 2/7 is indeed not the answer. So we're going to take a look at what next steps you would go through if you wanted to add these 2 fractions. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for a common multiple in our denominator, or our bottom number. So recall that that pink piece is worth 1/2, and that bottom green piece is worth 1/5. Now that I know that those pieces, the name of the size of that piece, I can look at the bottom numbers and think about what common multiples they might have. I often like to start skip counting by the bigger number. You can see me doing that here on the bottom of the screen. Now I'm going to skip count by 2s, and I'm going to find that indeed I can get to 10 skip counting by 5 and by 2. That will help me set up my equivalent fraction. Remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. And according to the math that we've done here, 1/2 is the same as 5/10, and 1/5 is the same as 2/10. Now, in order for you to see that and understand that, I'm going to build this with our fraction tiles so you can see that indeed, since I did the same thing to the top and the bottom in both of my fractions, my original fractions, I should be able to prove that they are indeed equivalent to the fractions that we've made here. So let's take a look at that and see what we find. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find out if this purple piece is indeed a 10th. So I'm going to place them up here on my whole and see if it takes 10 of them. Recall that that's how we discover what our denominator is. We ask how many pieces of equal size does it take to make that whole? And indeed it took 10. So now I'm set out to prove, does 1/2 really equal 5 of those purple tenths? And it did. And does 1/5 equal 2 of those purple tenths? And it did. It's so exciting. Now that the pieces are the same size, I can join this amount together. If I have 5 of those little purple pieces and 2 more of those pieces, I can join them together. For a number sentence, that would look like this. 5/10 plus 2/10 equals 7/10. Now watch out. One of the biggest 5th grade mistakes is taking those 10 in the denominator and adding them together. But as you can see when we look at this picture here, we didn't suddenly make 20ths. We still have tenths. But since the pieces are the same size, we're able to add them together. Pretty cool. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to just change the look of our fractions so that we don't always get used to seeing them with a fraction tile. And I would like to show you a mixed number operation. And this time I'm also going to switch to subtraction. So you can kind of see how the same steps apply when we're doing subtraction. And that would be that we're going to start with our common denominator. Now, I pulled one of these orange pieces, and I'm looking to see how many of those pieces it would take to make a whole. And it looks like it would take 3 of them. So I know that I'm starting with 2 1/3. I'd like to take away from that amount 1 and 1 of these yellow guys. See if you can figure out how many pieces it would take to make a whole with that yellow. It looks like it would take 4. So I'm going to be taking away 1 whole and 1/4. Same steps are going to apply. I'm looking at that denominator, 3 and 4, and I'm thinking to myself, what are some common multiples I can get to? Skip counting by both 3 and 4. And if you're ever totally stuck here, you can always multiply those two numbers together. That won't always give you the least common multiple, but it will at least get you a starting place if you're stuck. Being good at your math facts is super helpful for this skill, as you can just imagine. So I have identified that I can get to the number 12, skip counting by 4 and skip by 3. So I am going to use my rule for equivalent fractions. Whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the bottom. And I am going to convert both of these fraction pieces into twelfths. Notice that I am showing my little times 3 times 3 and my times 4 times 4. It might seem like extra work, but doing that step will keep you from making a silly mistake. Now that I have both of my fractional units in twelfths, I can add them together. This takes me a second here, but I'm attempting to build for you these little twelfths so that you can see that 1/3 really is equal to 4 of those gray 12th pieces. And if my math is correct, 1/4, or that yellow piece that we're seeing on the bottom there, should be equal to 3 of those gray 12ths. Once we have the pieces the same size, we'll be able to add or subtract. And in this case, I thought it would be fun to set it up like a subtraction problem so you could see that it works similarly. The steps are very similar. We're starting with that common denominator. Now that we've made a common denominator, we can go forward with our subtraction. So I just rewrote this problem for you so it wouldn't look so ugly and messy. I've got 2 4/12, and I'm taking away 1 3/12. Sometimes for showing takeaway on a paper or in this electronic platform, we will end up just showing it crossed out to showing that it's being taken away. So I am just going to grab one of my handy dandy pens, and I am going to show that I am taking away 1 whole and 3 of those 12ths. Notice that I indeed have enough 12ths to take 3 away. If I did not have enough 12ths and I was doing subtraction, I would need to regroup. And we will talk about that skill. It's a little tougher in an upcoming video. Okay, I'm going to take this amount away, and I'm going to show you that by simply crossing it out. Now, what am I left with? I'm left with 1 whole, and I'm left with 1/12 left over. Notice I did not change the denominator. I simply subtracted the numerators for a final answer of 1 and 1/12. That should give you everything you need to know to add and subtract with mixed numbers and fractions with unlike denominators, provided that you don't have to regroup. Some final thoughts for fractions. As we've talked about, this is such a handy skill. I love teaching this unit because I use it so much in my everyday life. We're always going to start with that common denominator. Knowing your math facts will help you find that easier, but if you're stuck, you can always skip count by the denominator or multiply them together to get a common denominator. Once you have those pieces the same size, you're able then to add them together or take some away. The denominators will not change when you do your computation. And finally, you might need to simplify your answer, so be on the lookout for that. I think when I was little, I thought fractions were terrifying, but I find them so fun now that I understand them a little bit better. So don't give up. If you're finding this skill a little tough, you will get better at it and you will use it for the rest of your life. Good luck.